Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Land and Home Show. Today we are not talking real estate per se, but we are talking land. I'm going to recap the trip I just took to Patagonia. Before I get too deep into this, I just want to make sure you know that you can see the highlights of my trip down in the description. They're labeled Chilean cities, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and that way you can just kind of click through and see the things that I saw. This video is going to be really like step by step from how we came up with the idea to planning it, to getting there, to every single day that we were there. So if you want to skip over all that, just go down in the description and you can see all the pictures and videos and avalanches and that sort of thing. No offense taken, but everything else is labeled chapter-wise like I always do, and you can navigate to the part of the video that you are interested in most. Hi, I'm Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor here in Central Kentucky and beyond. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me. I have not been around since right before Thanksgiving, but that's holiday time for you. I have been rather busy. If we're working backwards, my voice sounds like this because I got to go to the Rose Bowl for the college football playoff. Michigan definitely came out victorious, which was so awesome to see. So go blue. Before that was, of course, Christmas, and Christmas is a chaotic time, beautifully chaotic, but chaotic time. And before that was taking just a short little rest because right before that, I was in Patagonia, and that is what this video is about. Coming up, we still have forecasts for the market. We have to talk about the fourth quarter of 2023 because that was pretty wild. And we'll be back to normal real estate stuff in no time. But I thought this would be a fun way to start things off because, frankly, I am still mentally recovering from the amount of sheer activity and delight, honestly, that the last month has brought me. And hopefully I don't sound as bad on camera as I do to myself, because this whole not having a voice thing is really tough when most of my job is spent talking to people on the phone and in person. So let's hop to Patagonia. The reason why I took this trip, I took it with my best friend. We've known each other for 17 years. We met in college at U of M, and some years ago, we said we should do something big, hiking-wise, backpacking-wise. We backpack a lot together, and I said, or maybe Eric said, we should go to Patagonia. I'm sure there was bourbon involved, but years later, our 35th birthdays are imminent, and we started planning for this trip. We wanted to do something really fun and just different than our current backpacking experience, or at least our backpacking experience leading up to that trip. And so that's why we decided to do it. I'm going to go down basically every step of the way because I've been asked by friends, family, acquaintances, work folks, like, how did you plan it? What was it like? And that's what this whole thing is. So everything is sectioned off. If you want to see highlights to this video, highlights to this trip, go to the description below, and I've got each of the days that we were there just separated, kind of like it looks a little bit like an Instagram story or a Facebook story, but it's just on its own independent platform for those people that don't use Instagram and Facebook. So if you don't want to watch this whole long thing, just go to the bottom. You can see the links I just mentioned. You can also see who I recommend to plan a trip like this and stuff like that. So the planning of a trip like this could potentially be overwhelming. We did a lot of research, and at the end of the day, I say try to be as local as you can when you plan. We used a company that I would compare to, like, the structure of the company is a lot like Expedia. Where Expedia.com or Trivago.com, they're not actually in charge of flying the planes or owning the restaurants that you book into. They're just kind of like this middleman between you and the service provider. And that's kind of the route that we went. The website and the company was easy to navigate, but ultimately, once we got to the ground level, like literally in Chile, and talking to our guides the night before we were set to leave for the actual trek, there was a lot of missing information at this level. You know, the people that we used to book everything versus the people that guided us for the entire 5 day trek. So I highly recommend. I'm not going to say the name of the company that I was pretty dissatisfied with, but if you want to get rid of them and go more direct, I would say uh, Chile Nativo. So that's the name Chile, the actual country. Nativo is Nativo. They're right there in Punta, no, not Punta Arenas. They're right there in Puerto Natales, and they're more directly connected with the actual guides. And we loved our guides too. So uh, go as local as you can, or if you want to be even more local, uh, you know, just hire guide direct. I would say that our guides were incredible, and one of the two has his own guiding service that he runs independently, because these are all sort of freelancers that do the same thing for multiple guide companies. That's why I say be as local as you want, or as local as you can be. Our head guide was Danny. He owns Solo Adventure Patagonia. He's fantastic. You're not going to get some, like, I don't know, and now we're here, like, look at that rock. Like, you're going to get the geology. You're going to get to know that that's a flower you can eat, and don't touch that because your skin will break out. And look at this constellation, and this is how this glacier has receded and advanced over the years. And here's the cultural side of this area and how it was created. Like, you're going to get a full 5 sense experience with Danny. And so you can either go through a place like Chile Nativo, which knows other people like Danny and can contract them for your trip, or you can go to Danny directly and say, hey, I'd like to build a trip with myself and my spouse, or myself and these 5 friends. Like, this is how I want to do it. And he can do it on that level as well. So that's how we planned it. We planned it with the big Expedia.com type of group, and they connected us into like the local guiding economy there. And we had 8 people in our group. It was fantastic. I will get to the trek later, but basically it's an internet deal. You get on the internet just like you start lots of other things, and figure out what looks the best. You read the reviews, you watch the videos they have, whatever. Um, and it's pretty easy from there. That's no matter if you go local or not. Like, they're going to kind of take care of everything from getting to the park and back to where you're staying along the way to, of course, arranging your guides. Um, getting there. Getting there is an ordeal. You can pay $1 million to be in first class, or you can try to find the best deal ever using whatever website of your choice. I would say most tickets round trip are not very expensive. If you've ever flown across the country, you're looking anywhere between like $800 and $1,500, which I think for this level of trip and how far you are going away is not that bad. And I would say the $1,500 mark is definitely on the higher end. I did not spend anywhere near that much money to get there. I think it's a very affordable trip if you're used to the prices of air travel. This was not an exorbitantly expensive round trip situation. And then, as far as logistically, what ends up happening, regardless of your major airline, you will leave the United States likely at nighttime, and then you will arrive in Santiago the next day. Now, if you're going to the Argentinian side of Patagonia, you're probably flying into Buenos Aires, but however you cut it up, it is the case that you will basically land the next day. You will be in that large city like we were. We were in Santiago the entire next day. And then you will go down to the southern part where Patagonia is the day after you land. So for us, that meant leaving the United States December 2nd, landing in Santiago on the 3rd, being in Santiago the entire day of the 3rd, and leaving into southern Chile on a plane on the 4th. That is, so it's basically a 2 day commitment before you even get to southern Chile. And then from there, you still have to drive to get to the start of the park with your guiding group, or if you're doing this on your own with your rental car or something. There are a handful of places to fly from Santiago in order to get to the Patagonia region. We flew into a place called Puerto Natales. There's also Punta Arenas. There's also something called like Montfort or Mon something. I'm drawing a blank there, but um, all of these places are a couple hours or more from the park, and so depending on how you've organized your trip or how you've planned it, you may want to fly into one of those other locations, or you may want to fly into Puerto Natales like we did. But you're pretty much looking at 2 days of travel before you're actually somewhat close to the start of your trek. I think that covers it. So we decided to go in December because it's their summertime. There is hiking in the winter. It does not snow continually all winter. People definitely do winter treks there, but we figured between the line of work that I'm in and the time of year that tends to take a little bit of a breather, and the fact that it's their summer, that's why we decided to go. We were going to get some of the best views, and we were going to get vegetation and all these different things to be able to look at. And that's that. I will say that the sun sets at like 11 p.m. and that can take some adjustment, especially this time of year where we just fell back an hour for daylight savings time. So it's getting dark, 5 p.m. here, and then you go down there, it's a different climate, and then the sun is up literally until 11 p.m. 6,200 miles away from home, like so close to Antarctica. So the time of year is nice for the trek, but is also a little bit challenging for your body to be like, like what's going on. I definitely had several days of adjustment because of that. But I would recommend going in the winter. It is their high time, but it's also the time where you're going to be able to access the most things, especially if you're not a super experienced backpacker. Hiking during the colder times is going to require even more preparation from an equipment and gear standpoint. Okay. I think the last thing I want to cover before I go through all the days is where we stayed and how lodging works. So there are, they call them refugios, and those are a fancy word for like dorm or refuge if you want to be like super literal about it. And so there is no backcountry like tent staying. You can stay in a tent at a refugio, meaning there's a big building that has dorm style living on the inside, and there's a designated area for tents, and there's like tents everywhere, like every couple of feet. You can bring your own or rent some. Or you can stay in a cabin if that particular refugio offers private cabins, or you stay in the dorm style living where there's a cafeteria, a modest one, but there's a cafeteria. That's where you have all your meals for however many days you're staying there, unless you've decided to bring all your own and do it that way. But also having a fire is limited depending on where you are in the park. But I'm digressing. Refugios are basically the centerpiece of your lodging. And so wherever you're staying inside the national park, you will be staying inside of the refugio or basically next to it in a tent somewhere. The dorm style living is just what it sounds like. There are bunk beds in these dorm rooms, and depending on how big the rooms are, you might have 2 sets of bunk beds up to 4 sets of bunk beds. And then, you're in a hall. So from the cafeteria, you walk through some doors, and then you do this. You walk into this room where the bunk beds are. There's some lockers to keep your stuff. There's Eric. There's also these lockers, which no one figured out until all of our shit was on it. And that's it. There's some radiators in here in order to keep the room warm, but it's either really warm or like not that warm. There's, it's kind of like an old house, but it's pretty nice. Pretty nice for what it is. So we're going to start our next trek today here soon. Really, as glamorous as it sounds, I mean, I'm used to doing more of a tent style stay and backcountry backpacking, but I don't think that you're afforded the kind of backpacking that you may be used to doing in the United States. You're not going to be afforded that type of experience. Like, you're not just able to stay anywhere in the park and make a fire where you want. So this is why these refugios are here. And honestly, when you're going 16 miles on a hard day, like a bed is really nice at the end of the day. The dinners are great, the lunches are great. Like they pack you up with food. I came back home weighing 7 pounds more than when I left, which is crazy considering the amount of calories. So the refugios, they're really non-negotiable, but I would say choose the cabin if they offer it for maybe if you want a little bit more privacy. But as far as the bunk bed situation, which is how we did 3 out of the 4 days, I mean it's fine. You mostly end up with the people that are in your group, unless you're traveling solo, of course. And all I would say is bring an eye mask for that really strong sun because it's setting at 11, but also rising at like 5. So it's a very, very long sunlit day this time of year. And bring earplugs because, people snore. You might find yourself snoring with how exhausted you are. So I think that covers all the logistics. How we got there, how time of year, how you stay. And now, I just want to talk about the actual trip. Like, it was awesome. Santiago was great. It wasn't like overly, impressive, but it was great because it was easy to navigate. It's a fairly clean city, especially for having around 12 million people there. And the food was fine. I wasn't overly impressed with Santiago, and I hate saying that because I'm not trying to put it down, but it just, for a city that size, you would expect a bigger array of things to do and to choose from, food-wise, hotel-wise, and all that kind of stuff. Like in New York, you've got your dive bars and you've got your bars with dress codes. You've got your, street food, and you've got like Michelin star restaurants. Like there's a big spectrum. The spectrum is much smaller in Santiago. Of course, it's full of culture and art and things, but from a food and drink and amenity standpoint, it's not quite what you might expect out of the choices you'd have in other cities that large. Going down to Puerto Natales, that was on December 4th. So we flew out of the United States on the 2nd, got to Santiago on the 3rd. We were there the whole 3rd. Then on the 4th, we flew to Puerto Natales. Puerto Natales is in southern Chile, and it's the closest little town that you can get to the start of the park. It's still about 2 hours away, but water, gorgeous, amazing seafood. That's where, that region of Chile is where you'll find king crabs in abundance, and you'll find it on like every menu. You will find all of these wonderful mixes of the indigenous population and, who created civilization in Chile, as well as all the European influences. It's a really interesting melting pot. The history in a very broad way is basically Chile was a very remote, underpopulated place, from what I understand, back in the 19th century and certainly before that. And so leaders from like the early 19th and mid 19th century were basically encouraging explorers from European countries to come. Germans, Nordic people, Italians, French, like Irish. You'll see all of these different style buildings and street names all around Puerto Natales, and I would presume in other places in southern Chile as well, because they were saying, hey, we need more economy, we need more people. We have all this land, but no one's doing anything with it. Like we want to keep our country alive. So really interesting stuff there. But Puerto Natales was great. And so we had that whole December 4th day there to explore, to walk around, bought cool postcards. And then on the 5th is when, the following morning is when we left. So day 1 of our trip was cool. We're driving out there. It's about 2 hours. The way that we did the W trek, that there's basically 2 different treks you can do. You have the W, which is shorter, and you have the O, which is much longer. And the W does like a lot of the highlights of the park, but doesn't really get you through the entire park. Whereas the O circuit, or the O trek, literally traces a circle, in a manner of speaking. You make one gigantic loop within the park, and so you see some of the more remote parts of the park as well. So we did the W trek, and where we started, once we finished our drive, getting into the park, our first stop was Refugio Torre Central, and that was fantastic. We got to drop our stuff off. It was a nice, pretty, very spread out kind of look. I'll have pictures of at least what I took pictures of throughout this whole video, but very cool place. Dropped our stuff off and we started our trek. Our trek was an out and back that day. So we went out about 7 miles, came back to that same refugio later when our trek was over, and we went to the base of the towers. Absolutely beautiful. There are these, I wish I could tell you how they formed. Danny, our head guide, was so good at all of that stuff, but gorgeous as you'll see in the pictures, and just a really, really cool experience. Very difficult first day. I mean, you start kind of flat, and then it's pretty much a climb the entire 5.5 miles up. And then the last mile and a half is a massive, massive elevation gain that is pretty treacherous and full of loose rock and exposure to the edge and stuff, but so worth it. So we went there and we came back, and that was the whole first day. And the dinner service was fantastic. You know, you eat in shifts, kind of like summer camp style. So we ate with our whole group, and you get like these 3 courses, you know, of camp style food. There's no filet mignon or anything like that, but you know, rice, like big things that are going to help you and give you energy the next day. Protein. They are accommodating of dietary restrictions, for what I understand. I don't have any personally, but there were some in our group that did, and that didn't seem to be a problem. And then we went to bed. It was a great, great first day though. The second day was a little bit more of a recovery day, and it was a lot flatter. I mean, it wasn't rolling hills flat, but the elevation gains weren't so serious. It was pretty easy ground. I remember a lot of greenery that day and a lot of lakes. It was super windy. I've never experienced wind like that in my entire life.
There we go.
Like you can't hear yourself talking, and so you're just yelling and saying and stuff is flying in your face. It was challenging in that way, but a very an otherwise relaxing day. Loved all the greenery, the pasture style stuff, and the highlight of the trip was to see Los Cuernos. That's a word that means horns. They are a pair of jagged rock formations named Los Cuernos, the horns, because of the way they look. All I can say is that Danny, our guide, told us they used to be underwater, like a mile or 2 miles underwater. So it's really hard to fathom, considering when you look up at them, like they are so tall, like 8,500 feet into the air, like above sea level type of deal. So to think that like all of that used to have water all over it is kind of crazy, but very beautiful. We had a cabin that night, Eric and I, because that particular refugio had been filled. We learned of that maybe in March or April when we were, going through this company that organizes all of this stuff. The one that I don't like, the one whose name I won't say, they were booked up. So they said, "Hey, do you want to upgrade to a cabin, or would you rather sleep in a tent?" We were like, "Well, the cabin seems nice," and it was, and it was a very small upcharge for the cabin, but very much appreciated after having the first day be such a challenge. So very cool. And that refugio had great food too. Smaller area to eat in, smaller refugio just in general. But we stayed next to a waterfall, and that was really nice to hear at nighttime. Some good white noise, and just an overall good place. I think it was my favorite too because I got to take a polar plunge in a glacial lake. Because the first day was so hard, I really wanted to make sure I recovered as much as I could. So it was great that day 2 had a recovery hike, but I wanted something to really basically cool my legs down because they were going through it. And day 3, which would end up being our hardest day, was staring us in the face the next morning after day 2. So to take a dip inside of a lake that is created from a glacier, that was pretty neat. Very, very neat. So then we wake up and it's time for day 3. Day 3 was hell and worth it. Day 2 was a 9-mile day. Day 1 was 14 miles. Day 3 was about 16 and a half. And the whole point of this day was to see this amazing lookout. I can't even remember at what point I can't remember at what mileage point it was, but basically you start off with a pretty easy hike. You're walking along this beach, it's great, and then the up and down starts. I mean, switchbacks at a crazy grade, and then you get a little bit of like undulation, kind of rolling stuff, and you get to the Italian. It used to be a stopping point. Now it's just a ranger station. Italiano, that's what they call it. Italiano Ranger Station, and from there you start another trek up to this lookout. It's called Frances Lookout, and very well traveled, very rocky, very steep, not easy, but so worth it. At the top, you get to see the entire French Valley that has all of these gorgeous lakes. You get to see the mountain that this is all named after, El Paine Grande. It's massive. We got to see a 5-minute avalanche, which you can see part of in the stories that are linked on my day 3 story down in the description. 5-minute avalanche. I didn't post the whole thing because I curse a lot, just like my mind being blown. But really, really cool views. So the French Valley, the mountain, and then you can also see the horns, Los Cuernos again. But you're looking at all of this from this very, very high up spot. And as treacherous as it was, as difficult as it was, super happy that we did it because there were a couple of modifications that could have been made to make it easier or to make it longer and a little bit harder for a little bit of an extra view. And that's one of the reasons why I loved our guides, Danny and Mauricio, because they were very cognizant of what the group wanted, not just sticking to this hard and fast plan. It was more about how's your body doing, what is it that you want to see the most today? Because of course you could probably spend a month in this park and not see everything. So there was some very wonderful tailor-made experience going on. Not just all right, we've checked it off, like take a picture and go. It was a lot more thoughtful than that. So then after we came back down to Italiano from this great lookout, we still had 6 miles left to hike into the third refugio, which was, I wrote it down, Paine Grande, named after the mountain. That's the largest in the entire park. I think it sleeps up to like 600 people total, like between camping and the dorm style stays, but it is cool. All the refugios have full bars. It's a lot like a ski lodge. I mean, it's not as fancy as a ski lodge, but functionally it works the same. Tables and places to sit and hang out with people, cards, a convenience store, you run out of toothpaste kind of deal. It was really cool. I think I'm running out of battery over here. 1 second. So big refugio, not a lot of phone service, but probably not the best food of all of the ones we stayed at. I think just because of sheer size, they're going for like quantity and quickness to feed people in these rotational styles that they do dinners and everything. So it wasn't my favorite on the food scene, but very cool people there in terms of other hikers, and the bar was nice, the view was fantastic, and by the time we had finished that whole day, definitely just a welcome, like we were all very happy to be there by the time we got there. So in any case, spent the night, and then day 4 starts. Day 4 was supposed to be a recovery day. But I think that Danny's version of recovery and my version of recovery are 2 different things. It wasn't as hard as day 3, but it was a pretty difficult hike. It was about 9 miles. There was a lot of very severe elevation gain and opposite of gain, I guess, decline. And by this day, I had been suffering from a little bit of physical challenges just with like my own fatigue and trying to stay hydrated so intently, but I'm really struggling with that. So by day 4, I was feeling a normal amount of tired that I should be, because for day 2 and day 3, I was borderline injured, I guess, just severely compromised on the physical end of things. So day 4, I was feeling pretty good, but the hike didn't the hike didn't help as far as effort was concerned. Definitely put in my effort on day 4. It was also very hot that day, very, very hot, and the ozone is thinner. There are no clouds in the sky, at least for our trip. I guess it's normally kind of cloudy and windy, but we did not get a lot of clouds. 75 degrees, thinner ozone without any clouds in the sky feels like hell. So buffs are highly recommended. You know, we're not near the equator, but you're at the bottom of the earth, and it's a totally different ball game down there. So don't chance it. About halfway into the hike, we saw glaciers. I've never seen a glacier in my entire life until here, and it was probably the most emotional view of the park for me, just because like everything, like color wise and the scale at which everything is, like I'm staring down at a glacier that's been around for millions of years, but I'm looking at it from this crazy high vantage point where I'm also like burning up from the sun, and like seeing ice all around me. Like it's just like this overwhelming sensation. It's really, really hard to describe. It's even really hard to show in pictures, to really fully understand like how small physically you feel, but also how beautiful everything is and how much vastness there is in the landscape in front of you and around you. But that was a very cool stop. And ultimately, we would end up, after this 9-mile hike was over, we would end up at Refugio Grey, which was the smallest of all of them that we stayed at, but right next to the glacier. You could opt to get a glacier walk. I did not. Excuse me. I was content to get to the campground early and just like have a day of relaxation, since that was our 4th day. We've been going at it hard. So like pizza, beer, sitting, lots and lots of sitting for me. As far as I was concerned, that was enough. Really, really pretty grounds, and a great hike. As challenging as it was a great hike. On the last day, day 5, we wake up from our slumber, and we don't leave until the afternoon. There's a short hike to a black sand beach where you can see more of the glacier on more of a ground level, and a catamaran comes and picks you up, and you take this very cool glacier tour before you go back to the opposite end of this particular lake, which is quite a few miles away. And there you're let out in order to finish, getting back to your car. So day 5 was an easy day. We only hiked, I don't know, maybe 2 miles or 2.5 miles or something like that between getting to where the catamaran picks you up and then getting to the parking lot of the park where your shuttle picks you up. Gorgeous blues. Like I've never seen so many shades of blue in one place, or the shades that I saw ever. It was a really, really neat experience to like see a glacier with my own eyes. And that was pretty much it. I mean, I'm trying to make this video short. I mean, I took 5 days in this particular part of the country, and that amounts to over 100 hours in this park, and I could talk about it for probably 500 hours. But this is kind of what I can bring to the table for now. Please leave me your questions in your comments below. Again, you can see all of kind of the highlights of the trip, story style, like Instagram story style, in the description below, as well as my recommendations for who to contact if you would like to book a trip like this on your own. And then, of course, it's 2024, so we've got a new market. It's always changing. We've got a new market ahead of us. So we've got winter to bear down. It's rather cold here, and hopefully a lot more exciting videos. But for now, this is what I've got. I hope that you have a great weekend and a wonderful, wonderful 2024. We'll be seeing each other soon. Thanks for watching. Adios.